Senator Munya Barnes on 252-33.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, and Manana Sijus. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion at this time based on information that was received from the administration. I'd like to proffer a substituted version on the floor on Bill number 252-33, which is an act to appropriate the sum of $2,410,000 to the Guam Visitors Bureau for safety-related capital improvement projects in Tumon and for the hosting of the Festival of the Pacific Arts. And I'd like to ask this body if they could consider putting that on the agenda
So
in light of
motion to accept. Senator Agun.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me. Just a point of information. Can I just request from the sponsor the amendments or the differences between the bill number 252-33 that was reported out of the committee and the version that she is proposing that we adopt for consideration? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator?
Okay. Madam Speaker, this version of Bill 252-33 that I hope our colleagues can look over and accept is the substituted version that would appropriate $2,410,000 to the Guam Visitors Bureau for safety-related capital improvement projects in Tumon and for the hosting of the Festival of the Pacific Arts. Madam Speaker, 910 of that will be appropriated from the fiscal year's 2015 hotel occupancy tax unreserved fund balance and the $1.5 million from the tourist attraction fund from fiscal year 2017 revenues. As you know, Madam Speaker, we did receive...
That was just your response to his question, but
Yeah,
okay,
I'm
because
just going to...
otherwise we need to do the motion first to accept and then have all
Right,
these
but...
discussions.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
So-
Senator Agun, we're going to have, if we're going to continue the discussion, we need to accept it first. Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, so on the motion then to accept,
Objection, Madam
Seneca?
Speaker, on the motion to accept the substitute version. Only because, Madam Speaker, this substitute version is substantively different from the original Bill 252 that was proffered. Bill 252 was appropriating an unreserved fund balance. This substitute version also now adds language to do an advanced appropriation of $1.5 million from next year's tourist attraction fund, which is materially different from using a fund reserve balance, because now we're appropriating money that isn't even there yet in the bill if we were to allow for this substituted version onto the floor. So I just don't feel comfortable spending in that way. It's deficit spending to be doing an advance appropriation, and we need to, at the very least, have a public hearing on the matter, call in some of the people who are responsible for this whole FESPAC and ask them why now are they trying to spend next year's money on something that they had over 4 years to plan for. So I'm not comfortable, Madam Speaker, with this substituted version. I do have other issues to discuss on the original Bill 252, even using the unreserved fund balance, but at this juncture, to substitute it and to expound upon it so that we're not only talking about spending pre-existing money, but we're also talking about spending future money. I think it's just it's taking now the issue to a whole new level that I'm not comfortable progressing with at this time. So I would like to object to the motion to substitute Bill 252 on the floor.
Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the motion to substitute the bill. Any objections to substituting this bill is another procedural tactic to prevent this body from discussing the very important issues. And certainly there are a lot of valid questions with respect to why the mover of the amendment wants to move on the governor's bill, which seeks authorization to provide additional funding for FESPAC. And all of those questions are certainly valid. The desire to hold any and all accountable is certainly warranted. But how can we begin to do that if we can't even accept the bill to discuss the bill? Why do we continue to stand up and say, send this back to committee, don't discuss this, don't discuss that, I'm not prepared? Well, I come to session every day, Madam Speaker, prepared to do the people's work. And this idea of objecting to substituting the bill is a procedural tactic to prevent this body from having those very serious conversations
Point
with
of personal
respect.
privilege, Madam
I'm
Speaker.
talking, Madam Speaker.
Senators, please.
You cannot, I didn't mention anybody by name. If you feel insulted, then if the shoe fits, wear it.
Senator, there's no
I
need.
rise
Just
in support
please
of the motion to
stick to
substitute
the
the bill,
motion.
and I'm tired of one member suppressing the will of the body, and motion to substitute the
Senate-
bill would allow us to move forward, Madam Speaker.
Senator, we all know that, procedurally, of course, members can use any of the procedures in our standing rules or Mason's rules as well to either move a bill forward, move a bill back. There's many procedures, and it's available to our colleagues as well. So that's why I ask that you just please stick to the motion, and the motion is to accept Bill 252 as substituted on the floor, and there is an objection. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the motion to accept? Senator Agun, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I certainly appreciate the passion that's been extended in regards to this legislation. But I am going to have to stand up and express a concern with regards to, this is my opinion, circumventing the public hearing process with the allocation of fiscal year 17 tourist attraction funds and incorporate it into this piece of legislation. This body can do anything it wants with 8 votes. We understand the procedure. But if you take a look at the appropriation of $910,000 in the proposed substituted version, based on the motion, it would still retain the funding source of the unfunded or the hotel occupancy tax unreserved fund balance. I don't think there's any question with regards to placing that provision, that portion of this provision, before the body. It's taking an additional $1.5 million from the Tourist Attraction Fund for fiscal year 17, Madam Speaker. And that's what I meant. That's one of the reasons why I asked for the clarification, because our people have got to understand and know that the body is entertaining a provision, and should this motion be adopted and we discuss this particular provision as proposed, then our people need to know that, in fact, the $1.5 million would originate from the Tourist Attraction Fund. I don't even know what the estimate is for the Tourist Attraction Fund for fiscal year 17. I don't even know what GVB at this point in time is requesting for fiscal year 17, so that they can continue their operations and hopefully increase the number of visitors coming to our island community. I don't even know what the additional revenues will be to take care of some of the other safety features that the Tourist Attraction Fund has to expend or plan on expending on in fiscal year 17. Those are real questions with regards to the funding source. But let me also say this, Madam Speaker, as we look at FESPAC, that is a community function. It's no longer a function by one particular entity, regardless as to who are on the planning committee. It is a community-wide Guam-sponsored event. And I don't believe you're going to have any major reservation in terms of either having representatives from the administration identify a funding source in this fiscal year so that, in fact, it can be utilized to take care of the remaining balance that is required for FESPAC. Because it's a community event, we need to support it. Guam is hosting this event. The executive branch, the legislative branch, the judiciary, the entire community of Guam is involved in this. We have to support it. The question, Madam Speaker, and the concern that I have, not opposition, but the concern that I have, is taking from a funding source in which we have yet to even deliberate and discuss how much is actually anticipated to come into this community and what would otherwise be available. $1.5 million, even if we go back to a $34 million tourist attraction fund allocation, it's a lot of money. going to fiscal year 17? And those are the hardline questions that really should be responded to so that our people will know that the anticipated fiscal year, as a hypothetical, the anticipated fiscal year 17 revenues, we're taking 1.5 if this passes, and we're allocating it to FESPAC, but this is what we're going to have to forego as a possible expense in that fiscal year out of the Tourist Attraction Fund. So these are real questions, Madam Speaker, in terms of understanding the numbers, looking at the allocation, and looking at how we're going to be able to address this. But I have to come back again, Madam Speaker, to say at the end of the day, we need to figure out, and I don't see why representatives from the administration is not able to come before this body and say, we have hard cash in this account. Can we have authorization to use this hard cash for FESPAC, and over the course of the next fiscal year, if the provision contains it, we will reimburse that hard cash account? Because that's what the cash management component is. And then we would understand where the money would originate from in today's dollars, in today's bank account, and our people would also understand what we're trying to do in terms of supporting the executive branch, supporting the community with FESPAC, but in the same token, recognizing that real hard cash in today's dollars will be utilized possibly for the balance that is required for FESPAC. So I do render some concerns, Madam Speaker, because those are questions that I'm sure members of the public would want to know. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Senators, we're going to take a brief recess. Legislature's back in session. On the motion to accept, Senator Tony Ada, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of substituting the bill. And I just hope that, I understand there's an objection, and I hope that we'll wait until all members are present before we vote on that. I think it's very important. We set that standard yesterday. Let's move forward and keep it constant today, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Duly noted, Senator. Senator Underwood, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you for recognizing my request. You know, my major concern here about accepting this as it is has to do with my belief that we really need to have a public hearing relative to the second portion. Wait, maybe I'm reading the wrong. Which one was it? And I know that there's a sense of urgency, and I don't want for FESPAC to be unsuccessful. I don't want for Guam to be embarrassed. But you know, Madam Speaker, if we give notice today to have a public hearing next Wednesday, we can have the public hearing in the morning, and we can take a vote in a session in the afternoon. And you know, it's just a matter of 1 day, because our regular voting, 1 day delay, because if we were to push this through and we were to vote as we had scheduled on Tuesday, it's a matter of just 1 day, Madam Speaker. I believe that we really need to afford the public the opportunity to speak on this proposed appropriation, the appropriation of $1.5 million. And it's an advance appropriation. So, Madam Speaker, my suggestion is, relative to this, is to hold a public hearing, to schedule a public hearing, get the notice out today, hold it on Wednesday, hold a public hearing in the morning, have session in the afternoon, and we still are not going to delay. We're just delaying the vote by 1 day for this, Madam Speaker. So that's basically my suggestion. But I have concerns about accepting the substitute bill as it is without public hearing.
On the motion, is there anybody else who would like to speak? There is an objection.
Wait, Madam Speaker, can I?
Yes,
I
Senator.
did get a chance to at least
Yes.
close, right, Madam Speaker? You know, Madam Speaker, FESPAC is less than 3 weeks away. If this had the opportunity to be at least discussed on the floor, and maybe the opportunity for the administration and all the necessary stakeholders to come in, I was going to support those efforts. We need, as an island Guam, as a team Guam, to come together now. I know there's concerns about FESPAC and the handling of FESPAC, but I want to tell you that the Attorney General's office and the Office of the Public Auditor are really concerned and have come up to the community and have told them that we are addressing these concerns. But right now, Madam Speaker, this island of Guam bid it to host these games. And that was decided 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And Madam Speaker, I don't want to put blame on who did what and who didn't do what. But right now, we have to look at transportation, we have to look at housing, we have to look at feeding, we have to look at, and there is funds that are needed. We need to look at uniforms for our delegates. We have an opportunity to make this a great success like we did in 1999 for the South Pacific Games, which was the Olympics for sports. And we did shine in 1999. This is the first time ever that the Festival of the Pacific Arts, which is the Olympics of the arts, that will come to our island. Never happened before. We took so many years to ask to host this. And you know what? You talk about time. Yeah, time is of the essence. Because every day that goes by that we don't have the critical funding that's needed, let me tell you, we are not going to look good. As a matter of fact, let me remind this body who's old enough to know that we did have troubles when it was difficult to get the funding source because we did not shine in 1976 when we had to host the South Pacific Games here. I do not, from my heart of hearts, do not want to see that same failure. And as much as I have concerns too, and wanting to make sure that we do it right so that we don't have to re-ratify everything and do it by the book, I'm sure that with everybody looking on, including the whole island of Guam, that now the administration is going to dot their I's and cross their T's. But we at least have to give them that authorization and that funding so that they know that Guam's going to be paying for it. Because that is what Guam asked for. And we have to come together, put our politics aside and come together and work as a team. And saying, okay, we'll give this to you, but you better have everything in order. There's questions that have come up. Those things need to be answered. And let's call in the administration right now if we have to. But let's accept a version that is germane to what is being done in this session floor right now, and then let's call the players in. Because let me tell you, that is also a form of a public hearing that I can say that we can include. Because, Madam Speaker, if we don't do this today, and maybe I was even going to ask to see if we can vote on this today, because we need to show the people of Guam that the people of Guam who asked to host this event, to bring in over 3,000 participants with over 10,000 visitors that will be coming from 27 countries on the week, a little bit over 3 weeks from now. 24 days, if I'm not mistaken, 23 or 24 days. Madam Speaker, I guess some people, my colleagues, don't like to listen to what's going on and the urgency of why we need to come together and call the players into this room. I'm just asking my colleagues to give me that fair consideration. Jesus Christ.
Wait, careful. No need for that.
I'm just saying, if we all...
Point of personal privilege, Madam Speaker.
I didn't say anything. I just said, Jesus Christ. That's
No,
a part
there
of my
was-
heart.
There was an assertion that was made. And I'm just saying,
There's just a lot of emotions going on here, and I understand, Senator, thank you, but I'm going to have to recognize the Vice Speaker has been wanting to speak. Mr. Vice Speaker?
I understand the need to support FESPAC. If we are sincere, then let's give them real cash that is available today, not cash that is available in October.
So,
It can either be an authorization like the election commission bill, where the governor's given authority to transfer $1.5 million from wherever he wants to do that, if he feels like he's found something, real cash, or from the rainy day fund of the GVB, if GVB wants to put this on, give up their money. But real cash that exists today, not prospective cash that we are expecting after October.
so I think
Madam
then
Speaker,
the
if I
motion
may,
would be
I
to
truly
accept
appreciate-
so that then amendment can be made.
Yes, Madam Speaker, if I may and I want to thank the good Vice Speaker. Maybe we should, if I may, ask for a reconsideration, and based on that, maybe even do another substituted version to look at that hard cash funding that may exist today, and work on another substituted version, and still call the players in, if you can give me that time.
Okay, I just want everyone to know too that what the senator did say is that this is held every 4 years. The next time it's going to come to Guam will be on 2120. So we're going to be in recess. back in session. So maybe to kind of clear some things here, maybe Senator Munoz Barnes, I know you originally had a motion to accept, and I know you're working on something, so I would
Yes, Madam
entertain
Chair.
a motion to withdraw that.
Well,
The version that you had presented, because you're going to present another.
right.
So then,
Yes, Madam Speaker.
okay, so
To
withdraw.
right, I will withdraw that because I have a
Yeah.
new substitution that will be coming down after lunch.
Okay, so on the motion to withdraw without any objections, ordered. Thank you. We're going to move on to, we have two more, but 252 would not be until this afternoon. And then the Vice Speaker's bill we're reserving that, I think, for Thursday or Friday or both days by the Vice Speaker. So the other pending resolution on the second reading is resolution number 339, and Senator Rodriguez, you recognize.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Resolution 339 on the third reading.
And you want to speak?
Briefly, yes, ma'am.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Resolution 339 is really a matter that seeks to amend our current standing rules. And this is relative to amending Imina 33 na Les Latunguahan Oten Reglamento, the 33rd Guam Legislature standing rules, to ensure the timely public hearing of all bills by all sponsors so that people of Guam's voices can be heard. Basically, Madam Speaker, this what this does is reinstate a rule that was part of standing rules in the past, even prior to my time in the Guam Legislature, which is commonly known as the 120-day rule. And what that is, Madam Speaker, is that any bills that's introduced by any member of this body, once it's referred to any committee, that within 120 days, these bills must be afforded a public hearing. We all know, we just got from discussing a bill before us here. Some members want to ensure that there's a public hearing on the measure because there's substantial changes that need to be made. It just highlights the importance of ensuring that the initiatives that we bring forward here, Madam Speaker, whether I, as a chairperson, or any other chairperson agree with the measure or not, afford the public the opportunity to provide input and feedback on that measure. That's really the forum, Madam Speaker, to be able to ascertain whether these bills are good for the community, whether there's something, if it's funding related, whether there is funding attached to it, and it's identified. After that process, Madam Speaker, really it's then the committee chairperson's responsibility to ensure that if there was concerns, those concerns are addressed in a markup or substituted version. Or sometimes you'll see that chairpersons really don't move forward because they've consulted with the sponsors, and the sponsors have either backed down from that measure or want to continue to work to get information and make that bill or that initiative even stronger. So basically, Madam Speaker, that's what this resolution does, is bring some sense of order back into the process here. Like I said before, this is a rule that was part of the standing rules in the past, and so all we're doing here is reinstating that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. On the motion, does anyone like to speak on the motion, which is for resolution 339? Senator Nicholas, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Resolution 339 really brings to the forefront the question of how we go about moving forward in the legislative process. And really, the matter for all of us as various parties to vote on this resolution need to really consider is what we want for our legislative process to look like in our standing rules. Right now, if a bill is referred to a committee, the committee chairs have full jurisdiction over how that bill moves forward from their committee. And I am of the opinion that committee chairs should retain that full jurisdiction. And the reason why is because as committee chairs, we are responsible for the agencies under our oversight and all the public services that they impact. So for example, with me as the chairman of Finance and Taxation, I have an oversight responsibility over whether or not our government has enough money to be able to fund the initiatives that are moving forward. So if a bill is referred to my committee and I'm of the knowledge that there isn't enough funding to advance that bill, as a committee chair, I have a responsibility, knowing that information full well, to decide whether or not a bill should continue to progress out of my committee in the sense that it would impact the areas of my jurisdiction. What this resolution would do is it will basically allow for sponsors to have hearings on their bills even if the committee of jurisdiction feels that it is not appropriate to have hearings on those bills at that particular time. And while some may say that it's important for us to just move forward the public hearing process, in the way the legislative process works, once we initiate the public hearing process, the ball starts rolling on the bill being able to move forward procedurally through various avenues, whether they are amendments to the budget or whether they're going to be notwithstanding House rules provisions to move it forward on the floor. Being able to hold a bill in committee actually allows for the power of the law to keep that bill from moving forward, because the law requires a public hearing process. We cannot, notwithstanding the law, make a motion on this floor to move something forward. It would need to be in the form of a bill to do something notwithstanding public law. And so what I would like for the body to consider is that as committee chairs, we are given the responsibilities of the areas under our jurisdiction, agencies, whether there's money or not, whether we're going to be able to expand or contract services. And if we're going to be allowing for bills to be passed, when committee chairs know full well that the impact of those bills are going to adversely affect their areas of jurisdiction, it creates a situation where committee chairs are going to no longer be able to have full accountability over what's going on under their areas of responsibility. So for example, if so many bills keep getting introduced to continuously spend in our government, and I'm unable to hold those bills in my committee until we have the money to afford them, and those bills make it to the floor and somehow with the 8 votes they manage to pass, all of a sudden as committee chair, I'm going to be answerable to the question of why are we always broke, and why aren't you doing something to try and keep us from spending money we don't have? And then to have to turn around and say, oh, well, there's this rule that was passed that allows it to happen and there's nothing I can do. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, I just don't feel comfortable saying. I don't feel comfortable blaming, a process for why I'm not being able to deliver on the responsibilities under my committees. And so I know that sometimes the political consternations can cause committee chairs to hold bills in their committees for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because of jurisdictional concerns. Other times it might be personality issues. And in the end, I really think that the true arbiter of whether or not a committee chair is doing their job for the people of Guam is going to be the people of Guam. The people of Guam are going to sit back and say, was that committee chair holding that bill back for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons? Were they advancing bills for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons? But for us to institute a rule that will allow that process to be circumnavigated, it undermines whether or not that committee chair can truly be held accountable for the areas of their jurisdiction. And I really think, regardless of who's in the majority, that we should respect the responsibilities of committee chairs. Because if the other party, for example, is in the majority, and they have a different philosophy of how their committee should be operating, the people of Guam gave them that majority. Whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, the people of Guam gave them that majority. And so the ability of the majority to be able to set the policy tone through the committee chairmanships that they have and the majority that they hold as a result of the people's election, the people's vote, that's very important. It's very important. So I would like to ask my colleagues in the majority and in the minority not only for consideration today, but for consideration in future legislatures, that while this rule may have been in place in the past, perhaps it's time for us to consider a new era of responsibility with respect to committee chairs. I am more than willing to be fully answerable to every single bill that moves forward or does not move forward from my committee. I'm a very active committee chair. I've held bills, I've held nominations, I've moved forward bills, I've moved forward nominations. But all of them have been aligned with what I truly believe are my commitments to the people of Guam, and for us to have now a change in those rules that would allow my efforts to become circumnavigated as a result of a certain timeline passing makes it very, very difficult for me to be able to do my job. And, there's differences on the floor about, is our job to be bringing bills to the floor or not? Is our job to be facilitating public hearings or not? And again, that's all going to be a part of the philosophical debate over whether or not, when the people elect a majority, that majority has a responsibility to their areas of jurisdiction. But I'm of the mind, and I'm willing to accept full responsibility for having to answer for the actions of my committee. And it becomes very difficult to be able to answer for that area of jurisdiction if it's going to constantly keep getting bypassed through a change in the rules. And I will state this for the record, that I will be consistent in this position regardless of who holds a committee chair. If a committee chairperson believes that a bill is not in the best interests of moving forward for the sake of what their jurisdiction is, I'm going to respect that. I've never once asked for any kind of procedural consideration to bypass a committee. Never. Even if I've had bills held for longer than 120 days, I've never done that. Because in the end, the committee chair is going to have to be responsible for their action. And just for the record, Madam Speaker, there have been some statements made about this being an isolated incident to myself with respect to bills being held in committee. And I think it's just important for the record to note the different bills that have been held in committee far longer than 120 days. So if you'll afford me a minute here. We have Bill number 5, Madam Speaker, that's been in committee since January 5th, 2015. And this was a bill to authorize the building of a private prison. That bill is not in my committee. We have Bill 142 that's been in committee since July of 2015. And this was to authorize the Department of Administration to charge an account management fee for managing various government accounts. That bill is not in my committee. Bill 159, Madam Speaker, was to appropriate $250,000 for farmers for crop damage. That bill is not in my committee. But that's been held since August of last year. Bill 206, Madam Speaker, is also not in my committee. That was a bill that was introduced to create a part-time legislature. As a matter of fact, one of the co-sponsors on this very resolution is the one holding that bill. That bill has been in committee since November of 2015. So, Madam Speaker, no efforts have been made previously to bypass or circumvent the committee process with respect to those bills. I've never made an effort to circumvent the authority of committee chairs, even if my bills were also held longer than 120 days. I really feel that if you're going to hold a bill in your committee, whether it's a part-time legislature bill or a bill to spend more money when we don't have any, you need to be accountable for that. You need to be able to answer to the people of Guam for your actions. If people are unhappy that I don't want to spend, I got to answer those unhappy people too. But if we're going to set a policy direction based on the majority that the people of Guam have elected to this House, we need to be able to set that direction and be answerable to it. And most importantly, Madam Speaker, we need to be honest about the procedural actions that are taking place in the body and not accuse any one person of doing something when there are so many others who are exercising the same rightful powers. But if we're going to entertain this resolution to create an avenue to bypass that, we truly need to understand the ramifications of what it is that we're going to be authorizing. And I have nothing against public hearings. I think it's a great idea to get public input. I just don't think that we should be doing it at a time when we're not able to fundamentally move measures forward. If there's no money and we are probably going to have money at a later date, then it would be more appropriate to have a public hearing at a later date than to have a public hearing at an earlier date just because some artificial timeline has lapsed and all of a sudden we're going to move something forward even if we can't do it at that particular time. Likewise, if there's something that needs to happen quickly, committee chairs need to act quickly or they're going to have to be accountable for their inaction. But this whole question of public hearings and whether or not doing them in 120 days or not is better for the community is a double-edged sword. It could be a good thing for us to have a public hearing and initiate the legislative process on something that requires urgency or timely action, but it could also be very, very detrimental for us to initiate the legislative process and begin moving things forward when we can't afford it, when the timing is not appropriate, and when there are other issues that might be, within a committee's jurisdiction to cause them to pause. And I made a request to the Committee on Rules to respect the committees of jurisdiction and their requests to pause. And if we change this rule, we'll be creating a timeline of action rather than a philosophy of action. And some things aren't supposed to move forward within 120 days. Some things shouldn't move forward at all. Some things should. But in the end, the committee chairs are the ones who are going to have to answer to the people of Guam for the actions of their committees. So I'd like everybody to just really consider that when they're considering Resolution 339, not just with respect to this legislature, but with respect to future legislatures, not just with respect to this majority, but with respect to future majorities. And for the record, I will be voting no on Resolution 339. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, is anyone who would like an opportunity to speak on the resolution? Senator Morrison, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support, Madam Speaker, of Resolution 339. And I just, I'm not sure how even this rule was taken out. I'm not sure what was the process that took place, because I recall this was a rule that was in place in past legislatures. So, for whatever happened, we're obviously seeing that there's a need for this rule to be in place. Madam Speaker, I think this is a win-win situation for the author and the committee chair. There's situations where we're called upon, asked questions by those who come up with these ideas, and to help us to develop these policies. A lot of these ideas, Madam Speaker, is not a result of, as you know, our individual thoughts. A lot of this is collective thoughts and some of the cries of the community and how we could put legislation together to address some of these issues. So these are the voices that we are trying to address and allow them the that ample time in the public to express not only to this body but to the community why they asked a certain legislator to introduce such legislation. So the win-win here also, to Madam Speaker, is to not to put the committee chair on the hook if really it's the author's will maybe to hold back on a measure until such other information is provided to the committee so that it can proceed forward. I also was suggesting to some of my colleagues that maybe even a timeline be made possible through this process so that we can have an understanding, at least with the status, what is the holdup? Because I didn't learn about a lot of the concerns of I have measures. I'm not going to go through the list of bills that are stuck in committees, and I respect the committee chairs, Madam Speaker, but I just sometimes maybe the committee chairs maybe could take it upon themselves, maybe within an amount of time, to respond to a author of a bill to ensure what is the issue of proceeding forward, and then where can I help along the way to address or provide that information so that we can move it forward. I will respect that type of a response of came back. But I think some of us find ourselves writing official letters, transmitting letters to each other, asking for the status of these letters, and that's maybe some things we got to do to see where things at. But I don't think that's really necessary, given that maybe an author or committee chair could make it very clear to the author of whatever measures that has been introduced. Madam Speaker, these bills are publicly transmitted. They are put on the website. And some of them, there's a lot that linger on that website. I think if there's no hearing to be made on these issues, so those who work with a legislator or a senator to put this measure forward, that there has to be some recognition that these bills are in a public site that is not being acted on, at least for the most part, a public hearing. And I know there's probably considerations or some reasons why maybe committee chairs don't want to be on the hook to explain their reasons, but I think if we're not going to we're going to have issues with 120 days. I actually think 120 days is really kind of long. That's about 6 months to act on any measure, at least to get the expressed views of our community. I made it known, Madam Speaker, that there's no monopoly on ideas, and I've learned from this one of these recent public hearings of some of the ideas that why a measure came about for some of these employees within public health and why they wanted to proceed. I learned through this whole process why this measure was introduced. Madam Speaker, the author of the measure was trying to help people in a certain situation and follow through on the obligations that this government has made for a certain section of our government. And I don't claim to know everything, but that public hearing really made it clear that there is a source of funding that can address that measure. And I think many of my colleagues and the public would have never have known that had there not been a public meeting. Madam Speaker, even myself, when I introduce measures, I rely on key stakeholders, experts within these fields, or in industries that I may be impacting, but importantly, those that really have the institutional knowledge that understand what we're trying to accomplish here. And what we saw in this public hearing is a clear example of an individual with institutional knowledge that we could turn to for an answer, and he provided a clear answer. And it made it very clear how now we could move forward on that measure and to address those folks, those employees that will be impacted. I think we also want to point out, Madam Speaker, that not many of us has changed in this body, and I think some of us were part of the Rules Committee in previous legislature recently, and I think there was no objection to this rule with that the former standing rules. So I think there is a clear picture that there possibly a reason for why this rule was stricken out. I'm not sure who made the motion to, but I think maybe there could be an explanation to why the rule was stricken, and I would like to see if aside from holding bills or not, is there other reasons why those members within the rules decided that this rule was no longer needed. If there's anybody that could provide an explanation, not only to myself but to the listening audience or our public.
I'm sorry, did you have a question? I know I was...
Yes, Madam Speaker.
You wanted to know
I was
how
inquiring
this
if
all
anybody, because there hasn't been much of a significant change with the makeup of the Rules Committee, and the previous speaker was also a part of the membership of that committee, and it's my understanding that this rule has been always been incorporated in the standing rules. And I've just learned throughout this whole process of how we could I'm not saying circumvent, but how could we get a bill expressed, and later to find out that this was a rule that was in prior standing rules with existing a lot of existing members here that were part of that. So I'm not sure how the rule, my question really is how was that rule decided upon to be deleted from the standing rules?
And of course, I think I'll be dating myself. This rule came about actually 10 terms ago in the 23rd Guam Legislature when a coalition was formed between Democrats and Republicans. And in order to get the Republican support, they requested several things. Was that this rule then, if they're going to get the support of the Republicans, to take over the Committee on Rules and the Committee on Ways and Means, and to overthrow the Speaker, the nominee to be the Speaker of the 23rd Guam Legislature. The Republicans negotiated to place that so that they themselves then could hear their own bills. When the Democrats took over and won the majority, then that rule then was taken out.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, I'm dating myself that far back to the 23rd Guam Legislature. So.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate your insight, and I just wanted to understand why I really think it's a good rule, and for us to attempt to go through this process to get it back in, it's unfortunate, but I thank the previous legislatures for understanding that there are 15 of us that sit in this legislature that are elected by the community at large, and we do represent many ideas out there that are beneficial to our community, and not one individual can act upon everything that is being shared by our community. Madam Speaker, I have to say a lot of these ideas, I'm sure many of you can share the same sentiment, but a lot of these ideas are born as a result of people talking to us in our community. So I'm not trying to make any indication that a committee chair is trying to suppress any voices, but these ideas need to be expressed further to the community at large. And if there's any indication that from a public meeting that this idea that is born by our community, that it can't be addressed, then at least it was addressed in a public setting, recorded, and we can acknowledge that there are challenges with the bill, and therefore the committee chair, within their prerogative, can decide from there. But at least we know the status through this public hearing with the information that was provided, and making sure to these individuals in our community that, that's why we can't proceed on this measure at this time. I recall, Madam Speaker, working closely with the late Vice Speaker Pangilinan, and as a new senator then, and I didn't understand what's taking a while for my bill to get through, but I did go and ask him, is there a way I could get a public hearing on a bill, or how could we address a certain measure? What do you need? And he told me what I needed, and I provided information. I got some information from my colleagues. Is this okay? Is this good enough? And we proceeded. I got some answers. And I think, Madam Speaker, I'm making this, I'm disseminating this message to our community, Madam Speaker, that's how we should work here. And if the committee chair feels differently, I respect that perspective. But I think if he needs more information or she needs more information, make that clear. I want to help. I want to help these folks that have great ideas that can be beneficial to our community. Try to at least give them that opportunity time to express that idea and see if it could work. But I also want to help, Madam Speaker, this body, this committee chair, or those who hold these seats, that feel that they're being held accountable for holding measures that, like I was saying earlier, it's a win-win situation that through this public process, and if you heard it clear in the public hearing, there's reasons why he or she is not sitting on a bill, but is basically waiting until further information is provided to address some of the challenges of that measure. So, Madam Speaker, I wanted to make some changes to this measure. And I was thinking 120 was kind of too long, but I'll wait for, where there's a measure that took 7 months that we got some public testimony on, and now we can move it forward. But 5 months, 120 days kind of amounts to almost that same amount time frame. It's about 5 months.
4 months. 30 times 4 is 120.
Yeah, it's about halfway through, and that takes. I think some measures might take some time and longer than that, but I think I'll listen to the discussions if that could be reduced. We've done through some other process and through rulemaking, the AAA process that goes about 90 days for any rulemaking to go through its public hearing process and be adopted by this body or rejected by this body. So I'm hoping maybe we could also, if anyone's going to discuss this further, this measure, that maybe we could talk about the time frame, if that could be shortened, unless 120 days is fair. But, Madam Speaker, I'm here not to point out anybody. I'm here to in the hope that, if the bill is going to go along longer than 120 days, at least allow that author that is also a member of this body the opportunity to provide that measure forward and gather more information. I think it's helpful to the committee chair that may be swamped, may be challenged with other issues, pending issues that are taking too much of their time. But I really feel that this is an opportunity to allow for that author to help along the way, get the information needed through a public hearing, and move these measures through. We've introduced, I think, sitting on the site, I believe there's 300 to 400 measures right now. Some have already been acted upon, and a good majority are still needing information, and some are possibly may never even have their day in court. But I really believe with this rule, with looking at the turnaround or the success rate of how many bills are getting introduced, how many bills are having a public hearing, I really believe this measure, this rule, can really, maybe was underutilized in the past, but can be really used to an advantage with this whole body, and to help these committee chairs. I say that as from the minority, coming from the minority, along the way to move a lot of these measures forward. Because I think sometimes we may delaying some of our committee chairs from some of their measures they want to get through, and I mean that with all sincerity that, hey, I got some measures there that I can help out and get some public hearing on it, get some information, and I've always made it clear to the committee chairs what could I do to assist with the committee reports, what other information I could provide to assist the committee chairs. So, Madam Speaker, I think I've been here long enough to say that there's many ways where we just talk to each other and get things through because of good communication. So I support Resolution 339. I thank the author for moving forward and all the co-authors that are trying to put in place or put back in place a provision that I believe is beneficial to this body. Thank you.
I have Senator McCready and then Senator Underwood. Senator McCready.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in full support of this resolution, and I'd like to just make a few comments because I think in order for us to continue to move forward successfully, we all have to work together. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. It does matter if you work together and you respect your colleagues. The previous speaker, before the previous speaker, had mentioned that there was a few bills that were not reported out. A couple of them were mine. And he's been criticized for not reporting out bills. As for myself, I signed on to this resolution not for an individual. I can say that chairman has reported out some of my bills, and one of them we're voting on in this session. So I don't have a personal stake at trying to introduce a bill or a resolution such as this one, or being a co-sponsor of a resolution, because we all do our jobs. Every one of us, we try and do our jobs. We have very smart people in the legislature. Selfless job, we all know that. We've been here 4 years, some of us 2 years, some of us have been here longer. But I think the most important aspect when we're talking about all these bills, because I think we get lost sometimes in the fact that this legislature is the body that was elected by the people to work together. And I think when we do that, when we work as one, that's some of our best moments. But when we don't work as one, those are some of our worst moments. And I think that is probably the root of the problem, is us doing a better job of working together, being a little more responsible of working together, working with our colleagues, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. But there is good coming out of both sides, and sometimes there's bad coming out of both sides. So we have to realize that. That's the reality of working in this body. You know, I've had numerous discussions with the sponsor of this resolution on just committees and majorities, and and it's probably not a popular opinion from someone, but I think if there were 15 Republicans, there would be 15 committees. If there are 15 Democrats, there would be 15 committees. If the Republicans ever got a majority, I would be the one who say, as a Republican, let's give some committees to the Democrats. Let's spread it out. That way you have a more efficient, more effective process for the people. That's who it benefits, the people. Mind you, I understand it might not be the most popular statement that a Republican minority says, get the majority, you can make the decision on committees. But I do think for the betterment of the people, 15 committees shouldn't be a problem. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not. But I can tell you, if I was a Republican in a majority, I would be someone who said, give the Democrats some committees. Let them work. Let them do the jobs that we do. Because I know it's not an easy job. It's a tough job. These committee chairmen have tough jobs. You know, as a minority, you could just sit back and blame the majority. Or you can work with them. And I think for the majority of the time, we work hand in hand. We have to. So that's you know, I want to make it very clear that this resolution shouldn't be about one person. It should be about a process that we had adopted many years before, a process that the committee rules, the standing rules has changed, and I guess it's a living and breathing document, so it's able to change, to update, and to go back to maybe a rule that we're doing now with this resolution that might work, might not work. If it doesn't work, you can change it back. But as the previous speaker was stating about the 120 days, I think that's fair. That's giving someone the opportunity to do their job in 120 days. And if you can't do your job in 120 days, then I think you should be able to give it to somebody who's willing, someone who's willing to infuse some of that energy that they have for that particular bill to be heard. And I think people watching need to realize that a bill is just a starting point of a long process that it has to go through. So the bill is not the ending point, it's the beginning. It still has to go through the public hearing. It still has to be vetted. And most times when you go through a public hearing, you end up amending the bill before you put it on the floor. And so when you amend the bill, you put it on the floor, it gets amended again. We just saw that with the Cushing Zoo. Re-amended, and finally it gets substituted. But that is the process that this legislature has signed up to do. When we ask people to vote for us, that is the process that we're asking them to vote for. Let me do it so you don't have to. So that is the process that we should follow. It's a long process, and then after this process, every bill that we engross has to go to the governor, and then he decides if he wants to sign it, let it lapse into law, or veto it. Now, if he vetoes it, it comes back down here and it needs 10 signatures to pass into law. So it is a very long process. I give the committee chair people respect that they participate in that process. And I just think that this piece of resolution, or this resolution, allows that process to continue after 120 days. Some people in this legislature, maybe all, I'm not sure, but some people in the legislature might say after 120 days my bill has been forgotten, because we don't really get updates. It's not as if we have committee meetings every week and say here's the update on the bills that are in committee. That's not how it works. So I think the main objective for me is greater communication, greater respect, and the legislature acknowledges that we can do a better job of working together and making sure that every piece of legislation, whether it's important in my eyes or someone else's eyes, or it's less important in either eyes, still has that process that it goes through. And that's it. So I hope I made sense, but I don't want to sound like I'm trying to give a lesson here because I'm new at this as well. But this is what I have learned, and this is something that I think if we continue to remember what we have learned and continue to kind of emulate that and use those learnings, we should be okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Underwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I willingly co-sponsored this, primarily because I did have an experience whereby my bill, which was Bill 234-33, was in committee since January 25th. Now, that's shorter than 120 days. And my level of frustration was actually this, was that there just wasn't the type of communication that I had expected. And I believe it's just based on the fact that we've never really had a committee meeting. And I was speaking to a good senator from Santa Rita about my frustration, and she did point out to me that part of the problem that we have, that we are actually encountering with committees, is that we don't meet. We basically just pass around the bills to be reported out or to be passed, do pass, or not to pass, and we pass around the sheets, but we don't really meet to discuss bills, at the very least bills that are problematic. And so, you know, Madam Speaker, my level of frustration was just that I didn't know why Bill 234-33, which would have authorized the senators and the governor and lieutenant governor to voluntarily reduce their pay, why that was not given a public hearing. I just wasn't given a reason why that wasn't being put out for a public hearing. And
Senator, you're going to need to
and
restrict
so,
your comments on the motion,
now,
but not any specific bill that hasn't even been on the floor?
Okay, got it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Madam Speaker, I do agree with this, but I would like to make an amendment in that, you know, on line 9, where it says, well, starting at line 8, if the committee to which the bill has been referred does not hold a public hearing within this timeline, and the committee has not provided reasons for not holding a public hearing in writing, then that would be what I would insert there. The prime sponsor may call and preside over a public hearing on such bill and report out such bill directly to the Committee on Rules. I am proposing an amendment that there would be reasons that the committee actually would provide in writing the reasons for not holding the public hearing in writing. And if you don't get that, then that would then be cause for the prime sponsor to then call and preside over a public hearing on such bill and report out such bill directly to the Committee on Rules. So I am proffering an amendment with that phrase to be inserted so that we can then promote better communication and we can have a basis for understanding why bills are not being reported out.
Okay, that's a long amendment. We need to get that in writing, but So what we're going to do then, since it's 12 noon, is that I'll give you an opportunity to prepare then your amendment in writing, and we'll bring
Yes.
it up this afternoon at 2. So we're going to
Thank you.
recess until 2 this afternoon.